to you from our home studio here in Miami, Florida, at the College of FIU's College of Communications, Architecture, and the Arts. My name is Sergio Tigera, your host, and today we have an extremely special guest, a Cuban hometown hero who has been part of some of the largest rock bands in history, including Ozzy Osbourne, including founding and being a co-founder of Quiet Riot. You've also played on Whitesnake, Dio, and a number of organizations, a number of incredible bands that have shaped musical history. My friend Rudy Sarzo, welcome to the show, brother.
Gracias, Sergio. Gracias. Such a pleasure to
Yeah,
be here.
our Cuban hometown hero. So when we look at the 80s rock scene, the last person I would expect to see on there with the big hair is a Cuban guy, right? So take us, before we get there, take us back to your roots in, growing up in Cuba. You came over, I think it was in 1960, you said.
61.
What were some of the musical impressions that really made an impact on your career?
Yeah. As a kid, I was born in 1950, so my parents used to take me, and then later on, when my brother was born, 4 years later, both of us, we never had a babysitter. And they were young, and they liked to enjoy life. So, my parents would take my brother and me to actual clubs, because they love to go dancing, you know, and it was not like a really heavy drinking environment, like let's say a club, just like to drink and stuff. It was more like a social club with music. And back in the day, we didn't have DJs, we have live music, and Havana was full of live music wherever you went, and then we had las comparsas, which was like los carnavales. We had those. I always look
Sure.
forward to those, because that's where you saw a parade. We live near, like 2 blocks away from El Malecón, Blanco y Trocadero. That was our corner where we lived, and Galeano was maybe a block away, and a block away from El Malecón. So Malecón that's where the la comparsas, the parades
Sure, sure.
will go up and down. And that was really such a treat, because it was not just one weekend, it was like multiple weekends. I think for a whole month you have every weekend a parade. And it was basically the music that really attracted me to going there, because it was like marching bands, but there was like Latin marching bands. They were just playing, they were not playing like John Philip Sousa type of music. It was
Right.
like congas, and kind of like they have in Brazil, those big parades.
Yep.
So people were dressed up, ladies with feathers in their hair, and half naked,
A big party.
big party. And that was like, wow, this is, like I said, music always punctuated everything in my life. Something like if I went to any event, there was always music there, live music, whether it was a piano player with a singer, or if it was an orchestra. And back in the day, no, I'm talking about
Some of the
the
other ones, yeah.
friends that I have that,
Sure.
no, I'm just specifically talking about the Peter Pan
Yeah.
program. So, this is the state of the country at the moment, that there was a lot of fear that families were going to be separated, which they were. Once you put a family in jail because of political reasons, basically because
Sure.
they want to possess your property and any bank accounts that you have and all of that, businesses and so on. And that's how Castro operated, and that destroyed many families. So in order to protect the children, they became part of the Peter Pan program. Whereas in my family, we all left Cuba at the same time. And of course, it had its risks, because my dad was a technician at the La Revista Bohemia, which was like the major magazine in Cuba. And the irony was that Quevedo, which was the owner of the magazine, was a supporter of Castro. And I recall this. Quevedo, once Castro entered, and with the revolution, he threw a big party in his ranch right outside of Havana, because he urged all the employees to attend to show support for Castro. And as I recall, Castro was given a look around the place, and he liked it. So what do you know? Next thing you know, Castro takes over the ranch.
Oh my gosh.
And his supporter Quevedo had to leave the country. Things like that. It was pretty
Yeah.
ruthless.
So you
And
came over
yeah,
in 60, then you
61.
went to Jersey, 61.
Yeah. No, actually,
And
we came in 61 right after the Bay of Pigs, and in between the missile crisis. And then in 63, my family was relocated to New Jersey. And that's when I went to school in West New York. And I remember being in the classroom when Kennedy got shot, because that's how we found out. The teacher sent us home, and then we turned on the TV, and in the news, we get a gist of what actually happened. And it was instant watching our return to Cuba, hopefully, maybe ship go up in flames, because Kennedy was the only one who we could count on to hopefully liberate Cuba from communism back then. After that, nobody else did. And we knew that. Nobody else was putting out with Khrushchev and Castro like Kennedy was. And once that happened, it was like, we're here. We're not leaving.
yeah, reality
So
set in.
the reality really set in big time. And that was game changing for us. And I think for many, many, many families, Cuban families, they saw that this is, we have to really make a living here. Because before then, it was kind of like we were kind of like waiting, like something's bound to happen sooner or later, and he gets shot.
So then you grew up there until what age?
Yeah, that was it was interesting because it was my life changed. And in a way, so when tragedy happens, you can either, be depressed for the rest of your life, being traumatized by the event, or you can actually, after the mourning period, see some kind of silver lining, because you have, as I was 13 years old when this happened, and I had the rest of my life in front of me, and so did my generation, you know. So when Kennedy gets shot, it was right around Thanksgiving, and then we had Christmas, New Year's Eve. It was no celebration, nothing. And then the Beatles show up on Ed Sullivan, February 9th, 1964, and that was the game changer. I mean, it was like our life went from black and white to living color. Because one of the things that it did for me, and I don't know if your parents, when they moved to Massachusetts, if they experienced this, but where I was living in West New York, which was right across Manhattan on the Hudson, it was at a time where certain, I would say just about every ethnic group stuck together. They lived together in blocks and little sections
Sure.
of the
Yep.
neighborhood. And in school, it was the same dynamics. And we were, I mean, maybe there might have been less than 10 kids from Cuba at the school at the time versus like 50 or 100, Italians or Irish or whatever. And once the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan's show, and the next day we went from having pompadours like Elvis to combing your hair down with little bangs, and it became an instant identity. Like you like the Beatles, and it's like yes. And then there's an interest. People want to talk. They ask, "Do you have an instrument?" Yes, I have a guitar at home. And of course, we're just kids. We really barely know what
Sure.
we're doing, But we were in that consciousness started collecting, became a collective consciousness of that. And then, of course, we kept being fed more groups from England. Ed Sullivan had every week he will have a band coming in from England or sometimes the United States, like the Beach Boys and so on. And it was a constant flow of new music and new identities, new image. Like the Stones were different from the Beatles, and then you got the Kinks, and you got the Animals, were a little bit more blues based, and there was like this, all these different influences, that we experienced growing up. And every time one of us in our little group, now we have musical, not necessarily
Commonality.
bands by musical commonality, a community, musical community. And one of us will learn something like a new chord, we will all share it and find ways to utilize it, or how the songs that you're listening to on the radio actually use those chords.
What
And so
attracted you to the bass guitar?
that's an interesting question. So everybody had a guitar. Once, and this happened when I moved back down to Miami. Six, my parents, we drove from West New York in a Corvair all the way back down to Miami. And so as soon as we settled, I went to every block had a band. That was our social network.
Yep.
Kids getting together with bands. We had no internet, no,
Yeah, of course.
no Facebook or Instagram, nothing. It was just we do it face to face, And so I brought my guitar with me, and I went down to my block, because you cannot join the band across the street. You have to be in your block.
Yeah, sure.
We had rules, and I walk in and I introduced myself, and I said, I want to join your band. And they look at my guitar and they go, "We have too many guitar players." And I said, and then they said, "If you want to join the band, you got to play bass." And I said, "What is that?" And they said, it's like playing a guitar solo during the whole song. And I went,
And 4 strings.
"I'm in."
I'll take it.
Well, so what I did is I took the two extra strings, the B and the high E and the high B of my guitar, which was an acoustic guitar. I mean, nobody had professional
So
equipment.
that's funny. So you
back
just took off the strings, and all of a sudden you had your bass. That's
then.
it.
Yeah, basically in theory, that's what it is, except an octave higher because of the gauge of the
Right,
strings.
right.
But, we were just kids. We were just using that in order to have like our own community, neighborhood
An
kids
identity.
getting together. Yeah, like a little club, and get us out of the house. Because, one thing which was one
So
of
you
these,
found kind of your outlet to get away from all the arguing with different families and frustrations out into music, right?
into music, and the ones that decided not to be musicians, because not everybody, wanted to do that. Those became like little gangs, gang. And that would happen is they would take the dad would come home. They're living in a apartment. In my case, it was like a flat. We didn't have separate bedrooms. It was like, my mom and dad's bed there, and my brother's on my bed here. And it was all like one big room. What you want to do is get out of there, and you get some personal
Some fresh
some
air,
privacy, or fresh air, whatever. But the other kids went through the same thing, but they would have a dysfunctional home to deal with, where the mom and the dad, they're yelling at each other, and everything rolls downhill. And so the kids would take that anger into the streets and fight each other. So
Wow.
that is something that I grew up with. That street anger. And if somebody got in your face, you had to defend yourself, because you have to let him know that you were not going to put up with it. So there was a lot of fights, a lot of anger going on. And it was, and we took it as life in el refugio, in exilio.
Yeah. But
So
then
it was
you
real.
started playing in bands. Did you realize at what point did you realize that you're saying, "Wow, I love this. I love music. I love playing the bass"? Because you have become, over the 40 plus years that you've been doing this as a professional, and even before then in clubs and so forth. I've seen videos of you before. You're meticulous. You're a master of your craft, and you're extremely meticulous when it comes to the tones and the sounds. And you're an artist when it comes to that. You're extremely detailed. At what point did you say, oh my God, I'm just obsessed with this?
That's that's an interesting question because I mean, I have to look back to give you an answer. And what happened was that playing in Miami, I was surrounded by future legends, Jacko being one of them. And I used to go and watch him
Jackal.
play. Yeah, Jacko
No
Pastorius.
kidding.
Yeah. Oh
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And there was a club called the Newport Lounge right on the beach in North Miami. And Jacko was playing bass in his early days with Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders. And I used to go and watch him, and it was basically a bass lesson, just to see. But then again, I did not have the proper academic music education that he had, even though he claims to be self-taught. He surrounded himself with the best musicians in town. So he was learning from them. And also, when I was playing in the quinceañeras circuit, uh, it was an interesting uh, situation because the bulk of the musicians were Cubans, which meant that we play whatever was on the radio, but we always had a certain swing when we played it.
Right.
And the singers had accents, big accents. And to us, that was normal because we talk like that. Of course, they're going to sing like that. So when a bass player named Will Lee, who he's best known for the David Letterman Orchestra, and he's one of the top rated bassists, you know, in the
Wow.
music, and an
Mhm.
incredible singer. He he's American, he's Anglo, and his father was the dean of music at the University of Miami. So he was getting a proper,
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
academic
wow.
education. Oh yeah. And so he enters the quinceañera circuit and is like, where did this guy come from?
This
What
guy's
is he
too good to
doing?
be here.
Yeah, exactly. He's overqualified. But then again, when you're exposed to greatness, you can either turn your back from it and say, no, I I choose not to have to put the time and effort
Sure.
to elevate myself to somewhat, get close to that greatness, because greatness can be learned. I mean, there's certain aspects such as talent, but knowledge,
You would put in the time.
that talent without knowledge is just talent, but you don't know what you're doing. But
Right.
if you can actually gain musical knowledge and know what you're doing, the talent will start coming up to the surface because you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, you're
Because
leveraging the natural talent by having the right environment, the
yeah,
right knowledge that you can piece
yeah.
it together.
And I find this because I've been doing this for a long time, and also I'm exposed to other musicians around me and young ones too. We have two things that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the physical talent. People might have hands a certain size or strength, power. That's physicality, but it's not consciousness. Consciousness is completely different. And if you can match, I mean, the ones who are like beyond, the like the greatest ones, it's a combination of the right physicality for the instrument to be able to play it, and the high consciousness of playing the instrument. But there's a level in between that you can still uh, get results, high results if you compensate one for the other. Most great musicians have discovered that. Find out your weaknesses and your strength and work in both. You know,
Yeah.
work in both. Try to level them to
Yeah.
be very balanced.
So you spent some time, a period of time here in Miami. Then you decided to go out to LA.
Mhm.
What caused that decision? What
Very
triggered that?
simple. Another great question. There was no the type of music that I wanted to play, which was not dance music. I wanted to be in a rock band. rock. And I'll tell you what happened. In the 60s, Coconut Grove became the haven for all the hippies. There would be like Sunday free
The
concerts in the
disco.
park. Yeah, all of that going on. And so we're looking at the 60s, Arthur Godfrey, Jackie Gleason, a lot of the celebrities have moved down to Florida to create uh, their business ventures coming from New York. Now they're down here and they're developing properties, putting money into real estate and other ventures. And then they see this Miami turning into you know a place that's, let's say, if you were real into real estate and you're developing suburbs, all these communities, and somebody will come down from New York and say, I don't want to move here. Look at all these bunch of hippies. And I'm talking about Coconut Grove, which is one of the prime real estate, you know,
Yeah, of course.
communities.
Still
And
is. Yeah.
yeah, all of a sudden Coconut Grove is turning to like this, people sleeping in the park, and not it was the hippie generation, not necessarily homelessness, but that consciousness, right? So they were trying to find a way how to fix that problem. So, did you ever hear about Anita Bryant?
No.
Okay, back in the 60s, she was like a, yeah, like, one, not a super famous singer, but she had a couple of songs, and she was an entertainer, and she advertised orange juice, Florida orange juice,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So with her and some other, politically active entertainers, they were to create the parade or the event for decency. And it was going to be a small, just to create awareness for decency, right? So around the same time, the Doors play at, what was that? Was that Bayfront? No, not Bayfront. What is that in Coconut Grove?
The amphitheater.
No, no, it was enclosed, but it was right there in Coconut Grove. They performed. And that's where Jim Morrison supposedly, allegedly, revealed himself, put down his pants or something.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That they
But
played here in Miami.
in Coconut Grove.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
And there's no photos showing that he did it, but that was enough for the authorities to now, apprehend Morrison. He had to come back for he will be touring, and he will have to go down to to go for in front of a judge and all of that trial. There was a trial going on. Oh yeah, Google all of this. And so now
Jeez.
the parade that was going to be this little event, now it's at the Orange Bowl. It became like a
Wow.
massive
Yeah, massive.
movement to get rid of all the hippies. If you go to Coconut Grove, there's still one or two head shops right in that corner,
Uh-huh.
that little street right there. And it went from a hippie paradise to gone. No
Yeah, I mean,
more.
especially now, it's incredible. It's changed
Yeah,
so much, and
yeah,
it's lost its vibe. It's lost its character that it was known for.
yes. But then again, it was good for the real estate. It got
Sure.
it got rid of the undesirable hippie community that
So,
they had in
so
Miami.
then, how did that get you to LA? What was the connection there?
I'm getting there. Okay, so now you could not play rock and roll in a club in Miami, not even
Nice.
North Miami.
Wow.
I mean, we were the band walked in and said, "Sorry guys, here's your new playlist." So now all of a sudden it's dance music, no rock and roll. I'm talking about Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple,
Yeah,
and
nothing.
the Stones, none of that, because that was hippie music, you know, and you were not allowed to play that. And so now we had to move our bands, now start playing in Fort Lauderdale, which was a different county.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
And that,
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Completely
that's
different vibe up there.
exactly, especially back
Still rock
then.
and roll. Yeah.
Yes, as soon as you cross the county line, from
Dade and Broward. Yep.
Dade and Broward, yeah. So now, okay, I'm back again in a more of a So we decided like around 73, 74, move to New York. Again, proximity. You go up and down the coast, you're in New York. We wound up in Utica because again, it was kind of like, okay, some of the guys in the band had family and friends in Utica and they could help us out to establish ourselves in that community and to start getting the band together. And before we knew it, that band broke up and we wind up in Paramus, New Jersey. My brother and me, and then he got married. And so it meant that, okay, he's going to lead a whole different life than me. I'm not married, so I need to move on. And that's when that's when I started going west. First, I went to the Chicago area.
Yeah.
There was a really good scene there, musical scene. This is in the mid '70s, and there was a lot of great players and all that. And eventually, that's when I started playing the whole Midwest circuit again to get some money together. Always the objectivity was to move to Los Angeles, and I did in '70. I did. We did it like a reconnaissance trip in '76 just to get a feel of what was going on musically, and we decided, okay, this is where we need to be, but we're not ready yet. So we went back to the Midwest in '76, and I wound up we started playing the whole circuit: Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, whatever we could get a booking to get some money, and then take all that money, and now we're going to move to LA. And that was 1977.
Wow. So you get to LA, you start visiting all the famous clubs, the
Mm-hmm.
whiskey, the
Oh yeah.
troubadour, going to the Rainbow Room,
Mm-hmm.
listening to all the bands that were coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and then you stumble upon Quiet Riot.
Yeah, that was 1977. Walk into the Starwood, uh, and they were playing, and I was really impressed because by then I had been all over the country playing clubs, so I seen what the competition was. And when they finished the set, the singer Kevin DeBrello started walking around the club, and I bumped into him and I introduced myself and I told him, hey, listen, I've been seeing all these other bands around the country and you guys are really got it together. Just keep doing what you're doing and you guys are going to get a record deal, because that was the objectivity too of being in a rock band in LA, not to play top 40, but to actually create original music and get a record deal, make a living out of touring and recording.
And so you connected with him there, and then how did you end up playing with them?
Well, so I met him. That was that brief meeting that we had in the club. And then the band that I was in '77 broke up. We ran out of money. So I moved to New Jersey again, where my brother was, and now he had a lounge band with his wife, and they didn't have a bass player, so he invited me to come in and play bass. And again, I put my money away, and then when I was ready, I said, okay, I got enough money. I went back to LA, and I had bought the ticket already to return, and I get a phone call from Kevin saying, hey man, we're looking for a bass player, and everybody tells me that I should give you a call. And I go, yeah, I'm going to be in LA in a couple of days. So I'll call you when I get there, and we'll get together. And I auditioned for them, and I got the.
Wow. And so you played with them for a while. Did you join? Let me think. You played with them for a few years, right? For a couple years. And then you played with Randy Rhoads,
Yeah,
the magician, the incredible guitar player, Randy Rhoads.
yeah,
From what I hear, he was just an incredible person, just once in a generation talent.
yeah. What happened was that uh, a couple of things happened. I joined the band in '78. By '79, new wave and punk had become the flavor of that the record industry was looking for, which was the opposite end of what we were doing. We were Quiet Riot, just like many bands on the Sunset Strip. We're more of a glam metal band. And so we were not Devo, we were not the Knack, So it was like we're banging our heads against the wall trying to get the attention of the record companies. And they just didn't care. And then Randy gets the opportunity to play with Ozzy. And so he left the band in 1979. And the band just broke up. And Kevin DuBrow put his own band together called DuBrow, which I joined like 8 months before I joined Ozzy. I moved in with Kevin, and then I get the phone call from Sharon. Ozzy, she was Ozzy's manager only at the time. They were not a couple, and I because Randy recommended me. They were looking for a certain type. Not only somebody that could play the music, but somebody that had a certain image, and most important, somebody that was not gonna be a bad influence on Ozzy. And Randy kept telling them, Rudy's the guy, Rudy's the guy. So I got the call, got the audition, and yada yada yada. Here I am.
I mean, that must have been amazing. What was going through your mind when you said, "All right, you're our guy," and you were going to be playing bass with Ozzy Osbourne?
Yeah, I talked about this whenever a man asks that question because sometimes you have to reflect on certain things to actually put the conversation in perspective. I was raised Catholic, and I always believe that my spirit. I've always been somewhat. When I say somewhat of a spiritual person, is because I was seeking a lot, seeking, not being able to find exactly what I could connect with spiritually. And while I was struggling as a musician, I found serenity and peace reading the Bible. And I read both the Old Testament and the New Testament. That was my peaceful place among all the chaos and disillusions and frustration. I could always get some serenity out of my life going there. And then I finished reading both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I had an epiphany. I made peace with God that as long as my fingers kept moving, I was going to keep trying. But if I never made it, that's fine. My relationship with God was more important than anything else. And that gave me such a sense of serenity, peace. I mean, and then Ozzy and Sharon show up. They listen to us play it once. Then Ozzy gets up on stage. So I got to play the song 4 times. Then he turns around to me and says, "Hey man, do you want the gig?" Yes. Yeah. Okay. We
Wow.
got a bass player. And it's one of those moments that my life went from black and white to living color. You know, it was like, okay. But see, knowing where the blessings come from, having that spiritual center kept me from going off the deep end, in my life. As a matter of fact, that day, I went from sleeping on the floor in Kevin DuBrow's apartment on a shag carpet with a sheet, no mattress, no box spring, to moving in with Sharon's family in the house up in the hills. It just happened organically. They were such generous, kind people. They still are. But I'm reflecting on that moment. And Ozzy, he took a look at. We were playing pool, and he took a look at me and says, "Man, you look like shit. You need some rock and roll clothes." And he just leaves the room, comes back with his suitcase and pours it on the pool table. And he said, "Just grab whatever you want." I mean, nobody had ever done that for me. And I'm in awe because I'm seeing all these clothes that I've seen on album covers, Black Sabbath album covers, and
Wow.
magazines. And it's like, no, I can't have
This
that.
is Ozzy's clothes that I'm
Yeah.
wearing.
And he's just, here, take it.
That's wild.
And they were always like that. I mean, I only left the band because Randy died, and it was just I did not know how to deal with post traumatic
Sure.
syndrome. Uh, you know, this is like 44 years ago. I mean, I don't even think anybody talked about that. Bad things happen in life, and then you deal with it, but nobody
Yeah. Yeah, nobody spoke about
Is
that.
that
Yeah.
so? How do you deal with it? What does this mean? And the only way that I could deal with it was to go somewhere else, so I don't have to experience being on stage playing the same songs with the same production. We had a castle and we had a dwarf running around, and now you look over to where Randy's supposed to be, and he's not there. Yeah, how do I deal with that? Back then, now I get it. I get the responsibility that of all of us who are left behind to carry on and celebrate the memory and the
Hmm.
music that we made with those who are no longer with us. It's up to us to do that because we're the ones who were there. They really know, you know, what it's like to play with these, giant talents, musicians. But
And
back,
you went on tour with them, and for the Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman.
yeah,
What was it like? I've always wondered this. What is it like being in front of a massive crowd? I mean, that energy that you receive from them, the adrenaline running through your veins. I think maybe one of the biggest crowds you guys played in the '83 the U.S. festival.
yeah, the US Festival, yeah,
I think, right?
yeah,
What is
yeah,
that like
yeah.
to be
The
on
the
stage?
first big crowd that I played was with Ozzy, July 4th, 1981. Day on the Green, the Oakland Stadium. And I recently played another one, Birmingham, with that Back to the Beginning show.
Yeah, of course. We got to talk about that.
Yeah. And in Havana, we didn't have a big waves or anything. It was very
Yeah,
calm.
you can just see for
You
miles,
see
right?
4 miles on the beach. And that's what I see. That's what I related to when my first stadium. Oh, it's a sea of people, souls. It's the same thing as me being a kid watching the ocean. So I feel a huge calm when I'm on stage, and especially in a stadium, a big setting. I go back to that.
Yeah. It must be incredibly powerful because your actions, the sounds that you're creating, are impacting the lives of tens of thousands of people, and them just kind of reacting to that. That's got to be unbelievable.
It's interesting. Okay, it's interesting you mentioned that because for any musician on that stage, you don't have any control of how you are heard because you're trusting engineers, sound engineers, and
Right. The sound people.
the equipment, and you're on stage. So what we do, the best bands I've ever played with are the ones who contain and as musicians in a whole. So taking that into consideration, I have to really learn how to play with them, how to fit in with them.
And so, I imagine touring with Ozzy must have been wild. And you wrote a book about it, the Off the Rails, aboard the Crazy Train in the
Mhm.
Blizzard of Oz. So if
Mhm.
you haven't read that, I'm sure there's a million stories in there. For those who haven't read it, what's one story that you can share that sticks out in your mind?
Well, the reason why I wrote it is because about 25 years ago, basically pretty much the beginning of the internet, we had MySpace as the major source of.
Yeah, of course. And yep.
We didn't have Facebook yet, or Twitter, or Instagram. It was MySpace, and there was so many conspiracy theories and innuendos regarding Randy's death that it was appalling. The stuff that I was reading, I was going like, I can't believe people can imagine that this is what happened because this is horrible. So I figure if I don't respond to this, not just with a post, I'm talking about telling the whole story in a book. How did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
The lies are going to become the truth because if the lies do not get contested, then say no, this is a lie and this is the truth, they will become the facts. And so I took a year and a half out of my life while I was touring with bands, and I had my laptop. I went through 3 bands and 2 laptops, writing the book. And it was It was a labor of love because I needed to tell the truth of what actually happened and how it happened and the aftermath, how we all felt about it and dealt with it somewhat. By somewhat, meaning you cannot deal with everything. You just do the best that you can to wake up in the morning and carry on with life. And it changed everybody. It had a beyond massive effect on everybody's life, Randy's passing, that we still feel today, you know. And that's what the book is about. I wrote it for Randy just to, and it's in the back of the cover. When you pick it up, you can read why I wrote it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And was there a funny moment that you remember with Ozzy on tour that really sticks out?
Oh yeah, I mean it's
Probably
Ozzy,
a million different ones.
It was a delight. He was the funniest man I've ever toured with, and he was predictably unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen on stage any night, you know. But you knew something was going to happen. I just don't know what it is. Just like, you know, him biting the head of the bat. It was in Des Moines, Iowa, 1982. We're just, you know, like in the very beginning of the tour, and some, you know, I'm doing my little head banging thing, you know, just kind of like taking the bass from side to side, and open my eyes, and there's thing in front of me. It's like a crumpled up furry ball,
Oh my gosh.
and I look at it and I point at Ozzy, like, check this out, you know, like look at this, and then I just went on my way playing. You know, I had a job to do. So no,
My
he was caught in the moment. You know, he was
yeah, yeah.
just going for it. And he thought he was monkeying around with a toy, a
Oh,
little
wow.
toy bat, I guess. And no, it was real. It was dead, but it was real. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And you didn't even realize what had happened until afterwards.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's interesting is that so you're a man of faith, you know, you're raised Catholic, I believe you're Christian, right? And you know, you were on tour with one of the iconic rock artists that is the Prince of Darkness, so to speak, right? And from the outside, he looks, you know, potentially he's a devil worshiper and all this stuff, but yet here you are in the band,
Yeah.
you know, a very religious, a man of faith. I mean, I would have never pictured that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I always understood that me playing with Ozzy was a blessing because of my spiritual. I mean, it happened with, I had that conversation with God where I surrender everything. Within a couple of days, that's when I get the phone call. Yeah, that's
Maybe you were meant to be that counterbalance.
Yeah, this was a gift.
To him.
This was a gift. This was God's response to, okay, you're giving me control of it. Okay, I'm going to put you here. This is your blessing. You know,
That's incredible.
I used to get off the stage and go in my bunk and read the Bible just from gratitude. Yeah, just out of gratitude to God for having given me this experience.
Wow.
And then we got to get out of the bunk and just hang out with the band, you know. But yeah, I always, so I used to say, I used to think, okay, I know this is theater. This whole thing is made up about Ozzy being, you know, this evil entity or whatever, the Prince of Darkness. He's the nicest guy, you know, and that's what I go by.
Persona.
I go by the reality, how people treat me, how people treat each other, not by, you know, not by what they are preaching to me, and they might act completely different to how they preach. I judge nobody. If I am exposed to certain actions, I can see them, and I can see, for, you know, the reality of what the person is like by their actions.
Phenomenal. And then, you know, to wrap things up, I know we've been, you know, late on time here, but this has been phenomenal. Ozzy's last concert that you just had now in England, and you were amongst, I just saw a post on Instagram with you and the members of Metallica and a number of other rock, gods out there that had been influenced and or impacted by Ozzy. Tell me what that was like to go back
Yeah,
and be there for that.
yeah, but my main reason for participating, of course, they asked me to do it, but what I wanted to accomplish by being there was to be able in person to thank Ozzy and Sharon for giving me a career. I mean, without them, I mean, we'd probably not even be having this conversation. Of course, thanks to Randy Rhoads introducing me to them. And that's all I really wanted to do. Of course, they sent me a list and there were songs I was going to play. And it was like, not until like a couple of weeks before that I knew exactly who I was going to be playing them with. I was just saying, okay, I'm going to play these songs. I'm going to show up ready, like God take over. And I'm going to have a great time because I'm going to be so grateful and so happy to be there. And that was it. And then when I show up, I realized that everybody else who was there felt the same way. They all had a reason why to be thankful to Ozzy, to Sharon, and to Black Sabbath. Quiet Riot tour with Black Sabbath. As a matter of fact, when we got to number one, we were on tour with Black Sabbath that November of 1983. I played many Black Sabbath songs with Ozzy. He did a record called "Speak of the Devil," and of course, I was in Ozzy's band. So it was just a matter of being there. It was a love fest. All the musicians, there was so much love and appreciation for the people that were being celebrated. All the members of Black Sabbath, Ozzy and Geezer and Tony and Bill and Ozzy personally. There's a whole history. There were so many alumni of Ozzy's band who went on to play with other bands like Metallica, Robert Trujillo, Mike Inez with Alice in Chains, and so on. Zach Wilde now with Pantera. So it was a family reunion. It really was.
Yeah, it was like the tree, right? And all the branches, the roots that spread out, and
Yeah,
he's had such an influence.
yeah.
Well, thank you, my friend, for being on Game Changers. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe, and share this with somebody who needs to hear it because you could be the game changer in their lives.